the 2026 FIFA World Cup in Texas. Welcome to this panel of the 2022 Texas Soccer Summit, presented to you, of course, by the Striker Texas, as we explore the possibility of Texas hosting the 2026 FIFA World Cup. As you may know, the 2026 FIFA World Cup will be hosted by Canada, Mexico, and the United States, and will be the largest version of the tournament with 48 national teams competing. Dallas, one of the host cities of USA 1994, and Houston, looking to host for the first time, are among the potential cities to house soccer's most important tournament. FIFA will announce the 2026 host cities this year, and Texas hopes for a two-step of worldwide proportions. Dallas Sports Commission Executive Director Monica Paul, Houston 2026 World Cup Bid Committee President Chris Canetti, and renowned Texas soccer journalist Steve Davis join us to give us an insight into what is one of, if not the most sports watch tournaments, and what it can do for Texas, two biggest metropolitan areas. Monica Paul is encountering some issues at the moment. She'll be joining us shortly. But of course, we're joined, like we said, by Steve Davis, Chris Canetti. Steve, we'll start with you. Just tell us a little bit, a little refresher for those of our viewers on your history of covering the sport in the United States.
So I used to brag a little bit that I've covered six World Cups as a writer on on four different continents. But now I realize that just makes me sound a little old, so I'll just kind of throw that out there. Six World Cups on four different continents I've covered as a writer. Wrote for a long time for the Dallas Morning News, then for ESPN, then for Sports Illustrated, and then I was the lead soccer writer for NBC Pro Soccer Talk. Then I sort of shifted into a little bit more podcasting. We got a long-running ESPN Soccer Today podcast here in Dallas, and now I'm the TV analyst for FC Dallas.
A resume that many journalists, I'm sure, are envious of and would love to have. Thank you, Steve, for joining us. Chris, for our viewers, can you give us a little bit more on your background of covering the sport?
Sure. So, as you mentioned, I'm currently the president of the Houston World Cup Bid Committee. I've been serving in this role now for a little over 3 years. Started here January of 2019. Prior to that, I had a 19-year career as an executive in Major League Soccer, 6 in New York and 13 in Houston with the Dynamo. So last 22 years, been making a career out of the soccer business.
Yeah. And of course, we remind our viewers, Monica's encountering some difficulties. As soon as she can join us, we'll get her reconnected into this panel to get her view on the 2026 World Cup in Texas. But Steve, you're up in North Texas. You're up in the DFW area, and you covered the '94 World Cup. What is the legacy of that World Cup for Dallas? What did it mean, and obviously, what's the potential of what this 2026 version could leave?
Well, I think you start with the fact that legacy means a lot in these decisions. So Dallas having participated in 1994, I think that portends well for Dallas's chances coming up this round, as you said, as they select the cities sometime later this year. Look, legacy in sports means a lot. Legacy in soccer, I think, means a lot. So just having had that 1994 World Cup, and around here, if somebody plays a sporting event in the Cotton Bowl, they're going to mention that it's the site of the annual Texas-Oklahoma Red River Clash, but they're also going to say it was a host of 1994 World Cup, former host of the Cotton Bowl. So just that history, it sort of gets into the water supply, if you will. That a place like that has such a rich history in soccer. People still talk about the quarterfinal between Brazil and Netherlands, and I was lucky enough to be there as a pretty young reporter, and it was absolutely the best game of the 1994 World Cup. So now as people talk back about that 1994 World Cup, a lot of times they reference, oh, what about that match, Brazil, Netherlands, on a remarkably godsend of a cool day in July in the Cotton Bowl in Dallas. So the legacy does mean a lot, and I'm sure we'll talk more about how the tentacles reach into everything going on over the last quarter century since then.
Yeah, a lot of people down here also made the trip up. I believe to Dallas was the closest city, and again, even if I'm sure Dallas would love to host it again, but at least they already had one, right? Chris, you got a big task here in Houston. Houston has never hosted before. Um, they're trying to host for the very first time, and many around here wonder if this chance kind of passes by. When will there be another one, right? So from your perspective and from your position with the Houston Sports Authority, what would it mean for Houston to host FIFA World Cup?
It's incredibly important for our community to become a host of the World Cup in 2026. From our leadership on down, everybody recognizes the value and importance of hosting the FIFA World Cup, the world's most popular and prestigious sporting event. We want to bring it to the city because we want to help make Houston a better place. And Steve touched on legacy. We see a huge opportunity to grow the game. We see a huge opportunity to impact things such as social and environmental responsibility. And obviously there's economic impact as well. So Houston is, of course, the fourth largest city in the United States, and rich in infrastructure as it pertains to airports and stadiums and all the things that Dallas has as well, by the way. So we think we'd be a fantastic host. And to your point, it is a once in a generation opportunity. 30 plus years will probably go by before the opportunity ever presents itself again. So our city has gone all in on this bid from day one, from Mayor Turner and Judge Hidalgo to Janice Burke, the head of the Harris County Houston Sports Authority. They've been very focused on us winning this bid, which is why they appointed me to this position 3 years ago. And hopefully, fingers crossed, at the end of the day, Houston and Dallas can both be amongst the 10 cities that are fortunate enough to host in 2026.
Yeah. How big is the confidence of the bid to be able to get this thing? I mean, I think maybe everybody knowing what's at stake makes it feel a little unsure, but just I mean, it almost seems like these two cities are home runs, right?
It's a great question
Chris,
when
I'll
you
start with
ask
you.
that about the confidence level. Here's how I'll answer that. We know we have what it takes to host a FIFA World Cup, Victor. Houston has been, tremendous host of many, many big sporting events over the last several decades, just like Dallas has with Super Bowls and Final Fours and major international soccer matches. We've got all the infrastructure in place from like I said, the two international airports, the hotels, the stadiums, the training pitches and parks. You name it. We feel confident that we don't have any weaknesses. However, you can't rest on your laurels. You can't take anything for granted. We're acting as though we're on the bubble. If this was NCAA selection Sunday, and you got to win those last few games to get in. So while we know we've got a strong case, again, we're still fighting, and we know we just can't rest on any laurels here.
Yeah. We're rejoined for our viewers here at the Texas Soccer Summit by Dallas Sports Commission Executive Director Monica Paul. Monica, I know we had a couple of problems there, but just we'd like to give you a couple space to introduce yourself a little bit to our viewers, give them a little background of your work here in the sport with this bid and prior.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. I've been here in Dallas for just over 13 years, and very much like Chris said, Dallas is honored to, be on the world stage, to be in the running to host this World Cup, but then also very, I guess, proud of our resume right now of the major events that we've hosted up until this point. So really what my job is at the Sports Commission is to continue to bring major sporting events like the World Cup or youth and grassroots soccer events that we're very proud to host, and Dallas Cup, MLS Next, a whole slew of those, and really generate the economic impact for our region and for our cities here. So excited to continue this process. It's been a long time coming. I mean, I think we've been working on this World Cup bid for over 5 years now. So very excited to see maybe we're getting to a next step here in terms of being able to know if we're going to be a host city or not.
Yeah, we were just talking to Steve about the legacy of USA '94 and Dallas's part in it. can you talk about from your perspective, from the Dallas Sports Commission perspective, what it would mean for Dallas to host again?
Well, I mean, I think it's an honor. Anytime you're able to host a World Cup, the largest single sporting event in the world, I think that means something, and properly positions yourself as a city and a region as a true international destination. I'll tell you that in the years that I've been here, we have hosted Super Bowl, NBA All-Star Game, NCAA Men's Final Four, WrestleMania, Winter Classic, those types of things. But whenever I talk to people about what I do or the possibility of this World Cup coming, back to Dallas, they can always tell me where they were if they were here in Dallas in 1994, and the impact, even if they weren't soccer fans, the impact that that World Cup had on them. And I think that's something special in itself. So we know that following 1994, that legacy of the MLS, and development and true development of professional soccer in the United States and in the Dallas area was something to be very proud of. And I think that you'll see this World Cup in 2026, hopefully for Dallas and for Houston, be able to continue to grow the sport of soccer at the youth, the grassroots level, additional opportunities for kids and officials and adults to continue to grow the sport of soccer here. We're over, we know, about 115, 120 soccer fields short of the demand here. So we're really looking to what is that legacy piece. Yes, we talk about economic impact all the time, and that's very, very important. And one of the main reasons to host a World Cup, but the legacy piece is truly important as well. So we're really hoping that we'll be able to develop, a tremendous amount of soccer fields here locally, as well as the programming, the coaching skills, the equipment needed for the youth to be able to continue to grow and participate in soccer.
Yeah, that's interesting. You mentioned it that way. Is that the way the best way to put it? Maybe that the demand for the sport has kind of outgrown the supply, like you said, of soccer fields, of maybe soccer spaces in the city.
Well, I can't speak for every city, but I do know that that is the case here in terms of the soccer complexes and fields to be able to play competitively, and even those that may not be travel teams but are just looking to practice, get on a team here recreationally. We don't have enough fields to be able to accommodate the demand that we have here. And obviously, you have other sports that are coming in that needs fields as well. And then, youth parks and rec facilities that have fields, but the demand is just so much that we're not able to keep up. But luckily, throughout the entire region, there's new development in Fort Worth that's happening, some new proposed development in Dallas. New development up north. So we're excited about that, but it's still not enough to meet the demand that we're seeing.
Guys,
Yeah,
I
Chris,
can add to that. I can tell you
Go.
that I
Yeah.
can tell you that I'm a licensed coach. I do some coaching. You ask anybody about the fight for practice space for any under 6 through under 19 team. It is intense. You go to any elementary school, park, any grassy area in Dallas, and in the fall or in the spring, and I guarantee space for their team to practice.
Yeah. Chris, I know Houston also has a legacy piece. Is that well? Can you speak about the similarities with Houston? Do you feel this is the same thing? The supply being outgrown by the demand for the sport.
Yeah, we definitely share the same challenge and issue here in Houston, where the soccer fields are in demand and cannot handle the supply is greater than the demand, just like Monica's saying in Dallas. The other thing we lack too is really quality facilities. I would, if I'm just being honest, Dallas probably has better facilities than we do, as do other cities in Texas, whether it's in Round Rock or College Station or other places. So I know it's something that I'm pushing for here in Houston, that not only do we add facilities, but we need more quality as well, just to be able to attract more regional events. I have a daughter who's 17 who plays competitive soccer, and I get out around Texas and to other parts of the country for college showcases and things like that. And unfortunately, here in Houston, we don't have quite the same type of facilities that other cities have, much smaller cities, by the way. So it's a weakness here. I don't think this is pertinent to our World Cup bid in terms of whether we win or lose, but it's an opportunity and from legacy perspective going forward. So yeah, I think we can share those similarities for sure.
And Victor, I'd probably add one
Yeah.
thing if I can. Some of it is, inner city and lower socioeconomic areas that have no facilities at all. So how do it may not be building an entire complex, but building soccer fields in those areas so they at least have a chance to participate and experience the sport is, I think, critical for probably both Dallas and Houston.
To kind of tie it in
Well,
here,
I think the
is
other
this
challenge
something that?
too.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Victor.
Sorry.
No, I was going to say, I mean, field space is clearly an issue, but another challenge that we all talk about is the fact that soccer is a pay-to-play sport in this country. So there's lots of kids who are unable to participate due to their inability to play. And a lot of times, those same exact people don't have access to fields. So as we think about legacy, growing the game, part of that is gaining more participation in the sport amongst folks who don't clearly have the opportunity. So how can we use the World Cup to create more opportunity for children to play? We've already started a few programs here through our bid committee. One's called Free Kick Soccer that we're implementing at the Boys and Girls Clubs, and the other one's called Girls Intro to Soccer that we're introducing through the school systems, just to try to connect youth at a young age to the game, to give them an opportunity to play because they can't afford to play club soccer, or they're just geographically nowhere near a location where good club soccer is offered. So fields is an issue, but also bringing the sport to aspects of the community that don't have access to it as well can help grow it and enhance that legacy.
Yeah. So I do want to follow up with Monica and Chris about this. How do these fields get built? From as an offset from the World Cup bid, and I guess and maybe that's my second question. Better question is, would these be initiatives that otherwise wouldn't be happening if these cities weren't bidding for the World Cup? Do you feel? Monica, I'll start with you.
Sure. Well, I think you see these initiatives happening already. Obviously, we know that there's a shortage and we know we need fields in certain areas. I think what you see with this World Cup bid is an acceleration of that and maybe a potential to be able to build many more fields quicker in for 2026, before 2026. We don't want to wait until 2026 to start building fields. So what can we be doing right now? Yes, it's going to take some fundraising efforts, working with parks and rec facilities, city leaders, identifying different spaces there. So we're hoping, and it won't just stop in 2026 either. We want to continue to do that. So whether it's FC Dallas Foundation that we're working with, U.S. Soccer Foundation, Parks and Rec, city officials, the larger facilities, the higher quality facilities, obviously take a much higher investment. So looking at those, private ownership and private funding that may be able to supply some of that. So there's different areas, I think, but I see it as an acceleration to try to get a little further to where we need to be.
Yeah. And I guess maybe a better question would be, is this almost something, maybe not mandated by FIFA, but somewhat of a requirement, or is it just something that the bid sees as a forte to for Dallas to get the bid or Houston?
Yeah, I think there's a responsibility that we feel as bid committees or host committees to ensure that there's a legacy left behind by hosting the event after the final whistle blows. So I wouldn't go as far as to say there's a specific requirement in place by FIFA, but Steve touched on it earlier in saying how important legacy is. And it's very important to U.S. soccer as well. Let's not leave them out of the equation. FIFA is going to come in here and they're going to want to run a great tournament and world-class football, and they're going to want to make their money. But at the end of the day, it's U.S. soccer and everything underneath its umbrella that stands to to really benefit long term here locally. And we all know what 1994 did for growth of the game in our country with giving birth to MLS in 1996, and what MLS has done to grow the game in our country, especially in the markets that are fortunate enough to have MLS teams. So while it's not a hard and fast requirement, at least in my eyes, it's something that I believe that all of the cities really feel a strong sense of responsibility to get behind. And I think we all have our own unique ways of looking at it to address it in our own markets. But it's going to be it's definitely going to be a benefit of the World Cup coming to these cities for sure.
Steve, we talked about the legacy of '94, but in this sense, how did you see that World Cup accelerate? Out in the fields, the soccer community in the DFW area, that could be even more accelerated this time around with 2026.
I think Dallas was in a little bit of a different spot then, because the youth soccer infrastructure here was pretty strong at that point because of events like the Dallas Cup, which was already well established as a premier international soccer tournament. And then going back to the 70s, the Dallas Tornado, they did such a good job of weaving themselves through the soccer community, of creating soccer leagues, soccer camps, just creating all the grassroots infrastructure. So in terms of youth soccer, Dallas was already very strong. It had the Sting Soccer Club back then that was probably the premier girls outfit in the country. And so it wasn't just boys youth soccer, it was girls youth soccer. So to your question, though, what 1994 did for Dallas was it positioned it to be a Major League Soccer club. Another legacy of the 1994 World Cup, and I said we would just keep speaking about legacy because there's so much to talk about there, but another legacy of 1994 was that 2 years after that, of course, Major League Soccer started, and the beginnings of it had already been sown and planted in 1994. But as a World Cup city that was successful in hosting not just the games, but the International Broadcast Center, and I think a lot of people may not even remember, but FIFA had one of its established headquarters right here out in Las Colinas. So the legacy of that positioned Dallas to be a Major League Soccer club, which then kept Dallas sort of ahead of a lot of communities. Even Chris's group down in Houston, they came in a little bit later as a team relocated from San Jose, but just in this race, this arms race for everything, being ahead matters. Being, sort of first to market in your region matters, and that's what '94, in my mind, did most importantly in terms of establishing things going forward. Was it positioned itself? It furthered it as a youth soccer market, of course, even collegiate soccer market with SMU, but it was that pro soccer entrance 2 years later that really helped Dallas.
I want to take you to one of your tweets. You put out a couple pictures of your credentials from USA '94, where you mentioned you were the only soccer journalist, I believe, the only local soccer journalist at the Cotton Bowl, right, at those games. This going into media that covers the sport, right? Now it's obviously a way different landscape. Can you talk about kind of what the education was with media about the sport back then? Did they know the magnitude of what was coming to town? And obviously now it is more understood as the teams are trying to get media on board to get some attention for 2026. But what was the landscape of '94?
Okay, I don't know what kind of research staff you have there that dug up a picture of me in 1994 with hair and everything. So kudos to your research staff there. And not to correct you, but I was certainly not the only soccer journalist here in 1994 that covered games at the Cotton Bowl. It was very well attended. International media-wise, of course, the International Broadcast Center was there. There were plenty of other people around, local TV, local newspaper. Now, I may have been the only one with the expertise, and I may have been the only one, well, I don't mean to say that. I may have been one of them with certain expertise in the area, and I was the only one I know that was able to just travel around the country. I don't think the Morning News, Dallas Morning News, knew exactly what they had, so they were able to. They took a young reporter and just gave him carte blanche to go travel all over the country and cover whatever games you wanted to cover. So I certainly took advantage of that. So, but yes, to your question, there was certainly an education process, even in the way we had to report on the game. Now it's so much more advanced in the way we can talk about the game and talk about some of the intricacies in the game. Whereas back then, you really were obligated. even to explain a little bit in the text of maybe what an offside was, or you just couldn't go very deep like you could now. I remember one time an editor came to me, and I disagree with him, by the way, but he said I can't use hat trick in my copy. He said nobody knows what that is. And I thought, no, you're just an old white guy. You don't know what that is. But okay, you can't, as a 25-year-old reporter, you can't fight too much with the editors at the Dallas Morning News. So, anyway, but that's just one example. Somebody telling me people don't know what a hat trick is, and I think most people are educated well enough to, certainly today, they know what a hat trick is.
Yeah, but I mean, it speaks to, again, the respect the sport had to kind of garner over and has over the years.
Sure.
I want to take it to Monica and Chris. I imagine nowadays it's obviously more easier to work with local outlets, try to get them on board. Maybe they understand the sport a little more. Can you talk to us about that relationship with the media, and obviously as far as trying to get attention for your bid and support for your bid?
Yeah, we've had a great success in that, Victor. I think they're very excited. They, I think, appreciate what the World Cup could mean for Dallas as well. And really, we've tried to use this past 5-6 years, even with the Mex Tour, with knowing Mexico's here every year at AT&T Stadium, the other international soccer events that we've had to help educate. Have maybe a town hall meeting with them every now and then to try to keep them updated. But we've been very excited for the vast excitement of our World Cup bid. We get inquiries a lot of like, do you know anything more? When are we going to know this? When are we going to know the decision? When are we going to know if we're a host city? What do the next 4 years look like leading up to that World Cup in 2026? How can we be involved? So we've been excited about the excitement that our media has had for our bid.
Yeah, I feel that the local media has been behind us in a strong way. We've had numerous opportunities over the course of the last 3 years where we've needed their support and reached out to them and asked for their help in conveying whatever the message was at the time that we needed conveyed associated with our bid. And all the major media outlets, electronic, print, you name it, have been quite responsive and supportive. I believe they all want to see the World Cup come to Houston, and know that would be a great opportunity for them as well. So it's been good to feel them behind our back.
Yeah. What about the public now? How much of their help, how much of getting the public behind these bids is important, or is it just more of a, kind of a hidden decision, right? Is it almost more politics than it is a public a thing? Is the help of the public? Do you need people to kind of get behind this in your communities?
I feel for certain, yes. You want not just those who are on your bid committee, maybe even behind the scenes, working to be the one championing it. You want your public. You want the North Texas Soccer Association, the kids that are participating, the media, as you said earlier, your city officials, to be excited about it. I think it helps on the front end to get the buy-in, not only from a funding standpoint and how we're going to pay for a World Cup, but it helps them to be a part of the process and helps them to be your partner kind of along the way. So I think it's important. FIFA wants to know it's just more than a handful or of bid committee members that are excited and wanting this for their city, or a city official or a mayor, but we want everybody to be excited because we think there's a role for them. I mean, we're going to need volunteers. We're going to need, want to integrate the kids into the execution and staging of the World Cup, and want to ensure that they have all the information there. So, whether it be transportation and airports and hospitality community, we've tried to educate them along the way. There's still a lot of, I think, unanswered questions maybe that we each have, and not sure of what to tell them in certain aspects of their questions, but I think they're excited too. And obviously you have some naysayers every now and then along the way, but for the most part, I think our public's very excited about it. And again, I think it goes back to a little bit of 94 and what some of them experienced there. I mean, this is kind of a once in a generational, life, in a lifetime experience for some. Who knows when we'll host another World Cup or if we'll get the opportunity down the road. So really hope that our entire community really embraces it.
Yeah, I think it's important to showcase to FIFA and U.S. Soccer and CONCACAF a community that's united and behind it. It's a monumental task to put on these events. And I think as part of the evaluation of the grade, they want to see that there's a community that's invested and committed to this project, to this event, because it's just going to make it a lot more smooth in pulling it off and executing it. So it's been a priority for us from day one to get the community support, get the community behind us from all different aspects, whether that's the government or corporate, the soccer community, whatever it might be, all these different facets of the community being behind it and being supportive and showing that they can mobilize to pull off the big events, I think is critical. Something that we have tried to showcase as part of our bid to FIFA over the last few years.
Yeah, Steve, like you mentioned, you coach, you're out in the fields. What's the perspective of the public when it comes to these World Cup bids from your encounters?
Look, soccer is very segmented in its fan approach, or supporters rather. Some people like Serie A, some people like Premier League, some people are Major League Soccer fans, some people are of course Liga MX, but everybody loves the World Cup. So you mentioned World Cup. Everybody's excited about it. Everybody understands the special thing about a World Cup is that it's a quadrennial event. It only happens once every 4 years. As Monica and Chris were just talking about, it is very unlikely I don't know how long I'll live, but I would say it's somewhat unlikely that there will be another one after this. There will be a third World Cup happening in the United States in my lifetime. This is a very special one, and people recognize that in terms of it's being hosted by Canada and Mexico in addition to the United States. It's also special in that there are going to be more games, 80 games, about 48 teams. So yes, the answer to your question is you just say World Cup to soccer people, and their eyes light up. And by the way, a lot of people, and I know Monica and Chris have experienced this too. There are a lot of general sports fans out there that maybe don't have an interest in Major League Soccer. That's fine. They're interested in other things, but they will definitely stop down for a World Cup game, and I think that's important.
Yeah.
Plus, how many Major League Soccer fans have you met in your life that when they talk about where their love of soccer began, it was some World Cup experience somewhere across the globe, right? So whether it was Germany or South Africa or Brazil or Russia or France, whatever, it's just a great opportunity to create MLS fans by having the event here in this country. So because the experience is unlike anything else, and you can catch the fever pretty quickly.
Well, to your point, Chris, Lamar Hunt, the late great Lamar Hunt, he fell in love with the game at the 1966 World Cup when he went to the final at Wembley Stadium in England. And that put Dallas on a trajectory again that sort of kept it ahead of everybody, or ahead of a lot of communities across the country, because he came right back to his hometown of Dallas and helped start the North American Soccer League and on with his legacy. But to your point, Chris, yes, he fell in love with it at the final of the 1966 World Cup in England.
Well, we're all lucky that he did, right?
Absolutely.
Based on what he contributed to the game. So
great dude, great guy.
I'll ask you the big question, Steve. Your opinion, do you see Dallas and Houston both as taking part in this 2026 as a possibility?
It was a possibility, absolutely. It's funny because at first I thought, and I think this was the conventional wisdom, that they may only pick one venue in Texas, and I think Dallas would have had a little bit of an advantage there. Although I told people, Monica, I sat and had a beer one night with Dave Brown, and I said, you guys watch Houston, because NRG Stadium is a great place, and they're going to sneak up on you guys. But I'm sort of thinking of it differently. The United States presents a lot of great advantages for a World Cup in terms of the marketing and size of the stadiums, but there's some logistical challenges in terms of the distance between the venues, and so by maybe potting them together just a little bit, I'm starting to think now that Dallas and Houston being so close together, and possibly Austin, working in there as a training site, you could really create a regional pod of teams that would really work together. And by the way, Energy Stadium and AT&T air conditioned, and that means a lot. And it's going to, I know there are parts of the country that that don't necessarily get as hot in the summer, but once you can control the climate, that really takes that out of the equation. And so I think they're both pretty well positioned. Of course, they can speak to that better than I can.
Yeah, look, I think
Yeah,
the regional approach is a very interesting one. I know it's one that Monica and I both believe in, and it's not just to include Houston and Dallas. You have to include the 3 cities in Mexico as well. I think you create a great geographic cluster when you include the two cities from Texas and the 3 cities from Mexico for all of the ease of that you just mentioned, Steve, in helping create efficiencies in the tournament. What I find interesting when people ask about could it be Dallas and Houston is that nobody asks that same question about California as it pertains to LA and San Francisco for some reason, or nobody asks that question about Florida as it pertains to Orlando and Miami. And the other thing too is if you assume New York's going to get it, Boston, Baltimore, Philadelphia, and DC are all closer to New York than Houston is to Dallas, although we're probably more easily accessible to one another, through ease of transportation. And to your point, we both have huge advantages, in my opinion, in the roof. And it's not just from heat. We had a meeting in 2020 with FIFA, and it was in July, and they asked us about the heat, and we were prepared. And I think Houston had out of the 17 cities that were bidding, our high temperature that day ranked 12th. There was 11 other cities who were going to be hotter than us that day. But where I think the roof really comes into an advantage for both of us is also thunderstorms. Any city in this country, pretty much, except for maybe Seattle, maybe San Fran, could potentially receive a thunderstorm. We all know what that's like in Dallas for FC Dallas games or Houston for Dynamo games, and what a disturbance that can create on a kickoff time in a game. So with roofs, not only is it climate controlled and keeping people cool, but it's protecting that television broadcast to 190 million people worldwide. So I do think that's a huge distinct advantage that both of us have. And not to get too deep into it as well, but we also have the Texas Major Events Trust Fund. So we have a source of funding here in this state, here in Houston and Dallas, that nobody else really has. As cities, we have huge cost obligations to meet our requirements for FIFA, and to know that we have a fund available like this to pay the bills is an important thing. So these are all things that I think speak to Houston and Dallas making great sense together.
yeah. You both Dallas and Houston. Go ahead, Monica.
No, go ahead. I think they said it. I mean, basically, Steve and Chris just summarized everything I would have said, honestly. I think it makes great sense for Dallas and Houston to both secure World Cup matches and be named a host city. I think we've thought that from the very beginning and have been very open and honest with FIFA about that as we've gone through this bid process, the central location, the ease of getting back and forth between cities, and whether it's a pod type of system that they're going to be looking for to spread out matches, and in their host cities, we've heard a lot of different things there. 2 fantastic stadiums, and one of the keys I think is that the funding mechanisms that we do have here locally. We've both been up to Austin to meet with our elected officials and to ensure that that program will be around come 2026 and be able to protect that along the way, I think is critical. And what that really does, I think, if FIFA is looking at it, is while other cities, and while we may have to go secure funding and do some fundraising here locally as well, it's not going to be to the degree that some of the other cities have to do. And we can focus on really the operational side and executing the biggest and best World Cup for FIFA. And ensure that, yes, the pitch is what it needs to be. The atmosphere in the stadiums are what they need to be. Focus in on the transportation, safety, and security elements and all of that, and go into more of a operational legacy side of that, and maybe a little less focus on and stress of generating the funding that needs to be there. So, but again, it all depends on being a host city, and definitely hoping that both of these cities soon are announced as a official host city.
And obviously the focus is locally, Dallas, Houston, but like Steve mentioned, um, I don't know if it's come up yet, but or if it had, the conversation is pending on getting the bid confirmed, but the possibilities for other cities, right, like Austin, maybe even San Antonio or just around Texas, has that been discussed with some of your bids?
Well, for us, for sure, from a regional standpoint, not just in the DFW area, extending, towards Austin, Waco. I think there's different assets there. I know from a hotel perspective, they're, potentially looking at a 2-hour radius around the city to secure hotel rooms and what the demand may actually be, depending on the level of matches that you're actually awarded. But you've got San Antonio and Austin and Waco, and there's different facilities there that could easily be training sites, base camps that are needed. I think the economic benefits of a World Cup will be seen definitely outside of each of our metro areas in terms of what the World Cup could bring.
Yeah, I know. I know in particular, Rio Grande Valley and College Station are on FIFA's map as base camps. So a base camp is essentially when a country comes in and sets up shop in one spot and then travels out for the matches. So I know those two cities, at least through our conversations, have been mentioned as a possibility for base camps.
What about transportation? We talked about, let's say we do get it, right? Houston and Dallas aren't that public transportation friendly, if I can put it that way, or at least that's just my opinion of it compared to other cities around the country. But I imagine both of your bids are working on transportation plans to make the flow a little bit easier, especially with such international hubs like Dallas and Houston. What can you speak on transportation plans?
Yeah, I think again one of the benefits that both of our cities have is we've both hosted numerous major sporting events, so there's a lot of experience in this and how to move people. Our cities are both unique; they have lots of different, just differences. But again, we both have two major international airports. That's where I think it all starts: how to get people into the city first and foremost, and then it's getting people around the city. Here in Houston, we're fortunate to have the light rail, which will take people back and forth from the stadium to the hotel and convention district. But yes, there will be a significant transportation plan that needs to be put together using all the different agencies that exist here in our markets to make sure that it runs smoothly and that we can move people around. I think the one nice thing is that these games will take place, in my opinion, most likely during the day as well. Due to international television times, so we're not going to have rush hour traffic. Would be my thought on this one to deal with around game times.
Yep, Victor, we're very similar in terms of working hand in hand with the DFW Airport, Dallas Love Field, North Central Texas Council of Governments, the Director of Transportation there. He is on our bid committee for every major bid and helps on the execution of those. So while we don't, DART currently does not, have a stop in Arlington there by the stadium. We would execute very similar to what we did for NCAA Men's Final Four, what we're about to execute for WrestleMania coming up here in the next month, in terms of getting with the DART, with the TRE, with all of our transportation partners, and really arranging that additional dedicated lines for FIFA officials. And obviously, we're looking at it from an international broadcast center standpoint too, out at Cotton Bowl and Fair Park. We do have DART there that does connect to downtown, the hotels, the airports, the shopping districts, entertainment districts, and then just adding in that piece of that connectivity out to AT&T Stadium.
Yeah. Steve, you can speak to have been at that '94 World Cup. What are maybe some of the hurdles that you saw back then that maybe you would warn for 2026, or you would see wouldn't be a problem for 2026?
Well, I don't think there's going to be a big controversy about a big fence thrown up around the stadium. I don't know if Monica remembers that, but that was a big point of contention that was a big, as we like to say these days, nothing burger. So I just think there's a better awareness of international soccer and what it means and what it can mean. So I just don't think you're going to see the same obstacles thrown up. I think last time there was a little bit of mystery about it all, and I think it's part of the normal human condition that when things are put in front of us that we're not familiar with, we get a little afraid of it. But now everybody's just so much more educated about the World Cup, about international soccer. Monica's mentioned. My heavens, the United States national team, men's and women's, are making darn near annual visits here. The Mexican soccer team is certainly making annual visits here. As far as obstacles, I'm not just saying this. I just don't know what the big ones can be. They've got a little bit of an issue to solve with the field at AT&T Stadium in terms of making sure its dimensions are appropriate. And I can tell you the FIFA is very particular about that. They do want every World Cup field to be the exact same width, length, and they even want the stimp meter, the balls rolling the same way. So that's something that they can solve. But we were solving those problems back in '94 in Detroit. I remember a FIFA executive, it was Guido Tognoni. He told me one time, he's like, "Look, we have trust in the Americans to solve those logistical problems." He told me, as far as the field in Detroit, it was the first time they played an indoor game, so that was 25 years ago. He said, "The Americans can grow grass in my hand if I pay them enough money." So whatever obstacles are out there, they'll people like Chris and Monica they're gonna fly over them.
Yeah. For Chris and Monica as well, but I know Chris, you've used the phrase, this would be the equivalent of 6 Super Bowls, right, in about a month. Hosting one Super Bowl is probably a daunting task enough. Is it a bit of a big task, do you think? If I'm sure it's one of these, we'll worry about that when we get to it. It would be a nice problem to have. But what is that? That as far as hosting, what would be the equivalent of, like you said, 6 Super Bowls? That task.
Well, again, if you think of a Super Bowl, it comes into a market and there's a game on a Sunday and there's a week, maybe a little more than a week's worth of events leading up to it. And all eyes are on that one event. And as you guys know, as major soccer fans and World Cup followers, while we might host 5 or 6 matches in Houston or in Dallas, there's going to be 70 other matches going on over the course of a 35-day period. And eyes might be on Houston one day, Dallas the next day, New York the next, Toronto, Mexico City, you name it. But my point is pretty much once you get set up for one game or your fan fest or all the things around it, it just becomes a daily routine. And it's almost like a baseball team. You have a 7-game homestand. Once you get that first game under your belt, you just can roll into the next ones. You establish a rhythm. So it's going to be a monumental task, don't get me wrong, to set all of this up and get everything going, especially when you factor in how particular FIFA is with everything. Steve was touching on field dimensions. That's just the tip of the iceberg. So there will be. It's going to be a good thing that we will have several years leading up to it to plan all of these things: the safety, the security, the transportation, the training centers, hotels, you name it. There's so much that goes into this thing. It's why we will probably both be building out substantial sized organizations to independently focus on the World Cup if we're awarded the bid. So a lot to worry about, but definitely not concerned about having multiple days and events. I think we're planning on, if it's a 35-day window for the World Cup, that we'll be running fan fests at least 27 of those days in market to view the games out of market. So there'll be a lot to do, but I'm confident that we'll be ready, and Dallas will be ready, and all the other cities who are selected.
Yeah,
Monica,
Victor, I see it as
same
a
question to you. Yeah.
I see it as a positive. Obviously, we know we'll probably, from an announcement standpoint, have 4 years before execution of maybe 4 years, pretty close to the date of when the World Cup would be in 26, to get our organizing committees together and start putting executing our plans that we put forth to FIFA, and hopefully garnering additional information. But I think one of the benefits of it just not being a 1 week long event or a weekend long event, which some of the major events are, is it allows our public and our kids and the youth and the corporate community to really celebrate soccer, celebrate this World Cup, celebrate the entire community and this opportunity that doesn't come around very often for that 35-day window. So, and I would anticipate that it's going to be more than just 35 days. We'll want to focus on it for the next 4 years, but for sure that year from 25 to 26 to really focus on soccer and getting everyone ready to be able to host and excited to welcome those teams here to Dallas or to Houston.
Yeah, one of the things our communities could also get excited about is if we're awarded is the possibility of test events a year out, as they call them, right? So not only will the World Cup come through in 2026, but hopefully in 2025 in Dallas and in Houston, there's a major international soccer event coming here as part of our World Cup hosting obligations to put on this event, to test it all out, to get the field dimensions straight, to get everything in order. So we'll have a good dress rehearsal, if you will. That'll be fantastic for us as host committees, but also hopefully other opportunities for fans to enjoy the game and connect with it.
And I can add to what Chris just said. Teams are going to want to come over a year out, 6 months out on those FIFA fixture windows, because they want to see the stadiums. They want to see their training site. You remember the United States national team before 2014. They wanted, I believe it was 6 months out, to go down to Brazil, stay where they were going to stay, get used to it, play games there, play friendlies there. Teams will want to do that in all the venues in the United States. And of course, as we just mentioned, or as we said a while ago, 48 teams, not just 32 as there are now.
Yeah. As we wind down, I want to ask for Monica and Chris, what has been the most challenging part of this process for you, and or maybe what has been the most rewarding? Monica, I'll start with you.
Oh, well, I can easily tell you what the most challenging is for me is the waiting to know who the host cities are. I think has been the hardest, but obviously due to COVID, we thought we would have known before, but it has been a long process. We've been working on this 4 or 5 years now, in terms of getting the right information together. I think the most rewarding is, well, being right there, knowing that you can put on the best World Cup ever, and I'll say that for Houston as well. I have total confidence that both of our cities will be able to execute, and it's going to be amazing. And for me, I think going back a little bit to that legacy piece of the positive that we could I think the positive that we can leave behind down the road, and I'm sure there's more to come in terms of our planning. I know there's different ideas and stuff that maybe not written down on paper, but other things that we want to execute over these next 4 years to ensure that we leave a proper legacy for all involved. And honestly, the part of the legacy that we maybe didn't mention early on was the human rights plan that we were able to put together and work with various stakeholders throughout our region. I mean, and probably dug deeper than we ever have on any bid. So the relationships that we've done there, and I think the legacy that we can leave, in whether it's homelessness or human trafficking and other areas there, is something that we can all be proud of, because it will extend outside of soccer for every resident of our region if we're able to execute on some of those things.
5 minutes, Victor.
Yeah, I think the biggest
Chris,
challenge for me is, I think the biggest challenge for me is, and I'm sure Monica feels the same way as well, is just really not getting much feedback. This is like, imagine starting school in August and you go all the way to May and you don't get a grade or a quiz or a test or anything like that, a report card, any kind of evaluation, and you think you're doing great in your class, but at the end of the year you get your pass-fail grade and you move on. And what I mean by that is FIFA's played its cards very close to its vest in terms of how it feels about any of the cities, so you don't really know where you stand. and that's been a big challenge. And again, while we feel good about ourselves, it's, truthfully, is you really don't know where you stand, and that's a challenging way to feel. Probably the most rewarding thing is I would agree with everything that Monica just said. That's been rewarding for me as well. But to feel the weight of the city behind us. I mean, we've gone through a lot of doors in the last 3 years and asked a lot of people for a lot of support and help to help create our strategic plan and come together on it and unite as a city for our vision. And the enthusiasm and excitement and support that our city has backed us with has been amazing. So that's been really fun to be a part of. And again, I get it. It's the World Cup. It's a big event. It means a lot to a lot of people. So it shouldn't be surprising on one hand, but it's felt really good.
Yeah, Steve, I guess I'll give you the final say as far as what do you think this could potentially be for the two Texas cities again? Obviously, the decision coming later on this year.
Look, I hope it's both Texas cities. I hope there are all kinds of communities involved here. And look, I'll tell you this. I've told this story before, but it's been a while. Back when everybody thought the United States had a chance at 18 or 22, Sunil Gulati was U.S. Soccer president, very involved in the organizing bid. And he told me, I remember this phone conversation, about Dallas's chances. I think Houston has a great chance, but on Dallas's chances, he said, Steve, Dallas is going to get the World Cup. He said, it's going to get the final. And I said, well, Sunil, you can't really. And he argued with me, and he said, no, it's my decision, Steve. I'm telling you, because for whatever reason, I know TV contracts and the money there rule, but butts and seats really, really matter. And that 92,000 number, that capacity out of AT&T, that really speaks to FIFA. And he said that number really matters. He said he went through the numbers a little bit and said Dallas. He said I'm going to recommend that Dallas gets the final. And of course back then it MetLife and SoFi weren't really online, so it's changed since then. But just think about that when you think about Dallas's chances to host whatever.
Yeah, good numbers all around. Dallas, Houston as well. Monica, Chris, Steve, we thank you very much for your time. Very valuable, insightful information. And thank you, everyone joining us here at the Texas Soccer Summit here in 2022.
Well, thanks to the Striker for its outstanding coverage of soccer. You guys do a great job.
Thank you.